All right. Ready to explore the most complex structure in the known universe.
What, going beyond the Earth?
Well, sort of. We're talking about your brain.
Ah, even more fascinated.
You bet. So someone sent us chapter 2 of a neuroscience book and wants the key insights broken down. That's our mission for this deep dive.
Makes sense. There's a lot to unpack in neuroscience.
Absolutely. It can be mind-blowing to even think about how complex the brain is. Like, did you know we have roughly 86 billion neurons?
Wow. That's a lot. Like how many stars in our galaxy? Kind of lot.
More than that. It's like all the stars in our galaxy and all the galaxies in the observable universe combined.
Okay, now my brain's hurting a little. Just trying to imagine that.
Right. But that's the scale we're dealing with here. So to start, let's zoom out and think about the nervous system as a whole.
Good idea. Gets the big picture first.
Exactly. So we've got the central nervous system, the command center, with the brain and spinal cord.
Right. The brain's the boss. The spinal cord's the messenger.
Perfect analogy. Then we've got the peripheral nervous system, branching out, connecting to muscles, organs, all those sensory receptors.
Like the eyes, ears, skin.
Exactly. Bringing in information from the world. And within that peripheral system, there's the autonomic nervous system. This one's kind of running on autopilot.
Breathing, heart rate, all that good stuff.
You got it. Imagine having to consciously think, okay, heart, beat now, beat again.
Yeah, I'd probably forget and pass out. Not a good system.
Definitely not. But then things get even more interesting. Let's talk about the neocortex.
The what-ex?
The neocortex, that outermost layer of the brain, it's pretty special.
Special how?
Well, think about the name. Neo meaning new. Cortex is like a husk or shell, so it's the newest part evolutionarily. What makes mammals, and especially US, unique?
Ah, so this is where all the deep thinking happens.
You got it. Language, decision-making, personality, conscious thought, all that good stuff. You're debating whether to sleep in or hit the gym. That's your neocortex weighing the options.
Maybe mine's a bit lazy then. I like my sleep.
Mine too. But speaking of amazing, the neocortex is so big, it has to fold in on itself to fit in our skull.
Wait, seriously?
Seriously. Like stuffing a giant sheet of paper into a tiny box, you got to fold it. Those folds are sulci and gyri. They actually increase surface area. More neural connections that way.
Our brains are literally folding themselves to become smarter.
That's a pretty cool way to put it. And within this massive neocortex, we've got the 4 main lobes, each with its own specialty, like departments in a company almost.
Right, division of labor. Makes sense.
First up, the frontal lobe, the CEO. Planning, decisions, impulse control, even personality is shaped here.
So if my frontal lobe is having a bad day, I might make some questionable choices.
Maybe. It's also where your working memory is, holding info, manipulating it, planning for the future.
Ah, so like when I'm trying to remember a grocery list while also figuring out what to make for dinner.
Exactly. And there's the parietal lobe. This one's all about processing sensory information, especially touch. Helps you understand where your body is in space.
So I don't bump into things all the time.
That's the idea. It also integrates info from different senses, creates a whole experience.
Interesting.
Then we've got the occipital lobe, your visual processing center.
Everything I see gets processed there.
Yep, shapes, colors, motion, even facial recognition. Busy lobe. And finally, the temporal lobe, your hearing and language specialist.
So understanding speech, processing music.
All that. And memory formation, especially those vivid memories tied to sounds or smells. Like you hear a song and you're instantly transported back to a specific time.
Oh yeah, that happens to me all the time.
That's the temporal lobe at work.
Wild. So we've covered the 4 lobes, the neocortex, the outer layer, but what's going on deeper down?
Now we're getting to the really interesting stuff. There's a whole world of activity beneath the surface.
Like the thalamus, for example. It's like Grand Central Station, but for sensory information.
Okay, so almost everything we see, hear, feel, taste.
Except smell. That one's a bit different. But yeah, all that passes through the thalamus first.
And then it gets routed to the right part of the cortex for processing.
Exactly. Super efficient system.
Makes sense. Okay, what about the limbic system? Isn't that where our emotions hang out?
You got it. This is the network all about feelings, motivation, memory. It's how we experience and react to the world around us.
And within the limbic system, we've got the hippocampus and the amygdala, right?
2 big players for sure. The hippocampus is essential for forming new memories. Think of it like the brain's safe button for experiences. That amazing trip you took, the delicious dinner you had last night, all thanks to the hippocampus.
So if that gets damaged, you have trouble remembering things.
Exactly. And then the amygdala, that's like the emotional center, especially for fear. It triggers the fight or flight response when you sense danger.
So it's like our built-in alarm system.
Yeah, always scanning for potential threats. Keeps us safe.
Then there's the basal ganglia. They're involved in movement, right?
Yep. Planning and coordinating those smooth, fluid movements. Think about a dancer, a musician, those graceful actions, that's the basal ganglia, orchestrating everything.
So they're like the brain's
The
choreographers.
perfect analogy. And they're not just about movement, they help us learn new skills, form habits, even experience pleasure.
Wow, busy little things.
They are. Okay, now to really go old school, brain evolution-wise, we got to talk about the brainstem.
Right, that's at the top of the spinal cord, keeping us alive and all that.
Exactly. Breathing, heart rate, sleep-wake cycles, all controlled by the brainstem. Also, reflexes like swallowing, coughing, crucial stuff.
Like our own personal life support system running 2047.
Precisely. And then there's the cerebellum, often called the little brain, even though it's packed with neurons.
Right, and it's all about coordination and fine-tuning movements.
You got it. Helps us learn new motor skills, maintain balance, even plays a role in some cognitive functions. Think about a gymnast doing a backflip, a surgeon performing a delicate procedure. Cerebellum's the one making sure everything's smooth and precise.
It's incredible how much is happening in there without us even realizing it. So we've got the brain and spinal cord, all these complex structures. But how do scientists actually study all this?
Ah, that's where things get really interesting. It's a long journey of discovery, from observing brain injuries to developing some incredible high-tech tools.
Okay, walk me through it. I'm fascinated by how they figure all this stuff out.
Well, in the early days, scientists relied heavily on studying people who'd had brain injuries.
Right, like trying to figure out how a car engine works by seeing what happens when different parts break.
Exactly. They'd observe changes in behavior or abilities after specific areas were damaged, trying to piece together which areas did what. Painstaking, but it laid the groundwork.
High-stakes puzzle solving. And weren't there some famous cases like Phineas Gage?
Oh yeah, that one's a classic. Railroad worker, iron rod through the skull, damaged his frontal lobe, his personality totally changed, became impulsive, irresponsible.
Wow, really highlighting the importance of the frontal lobe.
Exactly. So as technology advanced, new tools emerged. One of the first big ones was electroencephalography, or EEG.
EEG, that's with the electrodes in the scalp, right? Measuring brain waves.
Yep, you're basically listening to the brain's electrical symphony. It's been super valuable for studying sleep, diagnosing seizures, understanding brain states.
But I imagine it's not very precise, location-wise. Just a general overview.
You're right, but then came evoked response potentials, or ERPs. This one involved averaging brain responses to repeated stimuli.
So it's like filtering out the background noise.
Exactly. Gives you a clearer signal, lets you study how the brain processes specific events, like recognizing a face or hearing a sound.
Okay, that makes sense. But when most people think of brain imaging, they probably picture those colorful scans showing different areas lighting up.
Ah, you're talking about techniques like fMRI, PETs, perspective.
Those are the ones. So how do they work?
Well, fMRI, for example, it stands for functional magnetic resonance imaging. It measures changes in blood flow in the brain.
So the idea is more active areas need more blood.
Exactly. It's like seeing which parts of a city are lit up at night, showing where the activity is. It's been huge for studying language, decision-making, emotions.
So those colorful images are basically maps of brain activity. That's amazing.
It is. And then there's optogenetics, even newer and more precise. It uses light to control specific neurons that have been genetically modified.
Wait, you're controlling neurons with light? That sounds like science fiction.
It does, but it's real. It's letting researchers study specific neural circuits in behavior and disease with incredible detail, revolutionizing our understanding of how the brain works.
Wow, that's mind-blowing. From brain injuries to literally controlling neurons with light, it's incredible how far we've come.
It is, and it makes you wonder what the future holds, right? What other amazing discoveries are out there?
Definitely. It feels like a golden age of brain research. And it's not just about the brain itself. This chapter also talks about the spinal cord, which often gets overlooked.
Right. The spinal cord's essential. It's the information superhighway connecting the brain to the rest of the body.
So it carries sensory information up to the brain and motor commands back down to the muscles.
Exactly, a two-way street of information flow. And what's fascinating is the spinal cord isn't just a passive relay station. It does some processing on its own, allowing for reflexes and coordinated movements.
Like the knee-jerk reflex. That's all happening at the spinal cord level.
Exactly, and those reflexes are crucial. They let us react quickly to potential dangers. The spinal cord also helps coordinate movements like walking and running, making them smooth and efficient.
So even though the brain's the both, the spinal cord's doing a lot of the heavy lifting.
That's a good way to put it. And the way it's organized is fascinating too. Each segment controls a specific area of the body.
Like a well-structured organization, each division with its own responsibility.
Exactly. And within each segment, you've got sensory neurons carrying information in and motor neurons sending commands out to the muscles, a complex web of connections.
But how do those motor commands actually translate into muscle movement? What's the link between the nervous system and our muscles?
Ah, that's where neurotransmitters come in. Specifically, a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine. Motor neurons release it at the neuromuscular junction where the neuron connects with the muscle cell.
So it's like a chemical messenger, bridging the gap between nerves and muscles.
Exactly. Acetylcholine binds to receptors on the muscle cell, triggering a cascade of events that leads to muscle contraction. And the strength of that contraction depends on how many motor neurons are firing and how often.
So if I'm lifting a heavy weight, my brain's sending a stronger signal, activating more motor neurons.
Precisely. And the more you practice a movement, the more efficient this whole process becomes. The basal ganglia we talked about earlier, they help refine and automate those movements.
So it all comes full circle. It's amazing how everything works together. But we can't forget about the autonomic nervous system, the one that's running in the background, keeping us alive.
Right. The autonomic nervous system, it's kind of like its own separate branch, operating largely outside of our conscious control. Heart rate, breathing, digestion, blood pressure, all that good stuff.
So it's maintaining our internal balance, keeping everything running smoothly without us having to think about it.
Exactly. And it does this through two main branches, the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems.
Oh yeah, I remember learning about those, but I always get them mixed up. Which one's which again?
Well, think of the sympathetic nervous system as the fight or flight system. Kicks in when you're stressed or facing danger, gets your heart racing, blood flowing to your muscles.
So that's what I feel when I'm about to give a presentation or facing a deadline.
Exactly. That surge of adrenaline is the sympathetic nervous system getting you ready to deal with the challenge. And then there's the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest system. It's all about relaxation, recovery, slowing things down.
So after a long day, when I'm finally chilling on the couch, that's the parasympathetic system taking over.
Precisely. Helping your body recover and recharge. And these two branches, they're constantly working together, maintaining that delicate balance in your internal environment.
It's like a dance between activation and relaxation. Pretty essential for our well-being.
Absolutely. It's a testament to the incredible complexity and efficiency of our nervous system. But we're not done yet. This chapter also mentions the enteric nervous system.
The what now?
The enteric nervous system, often called our second brain because it's this huge network of neurons that governs the function of our gut, largely independent of the central nervous system.
Hold on, our gut has its own brain? That's wild.
It is. It controls all aspects of digestion, from moving food through the intestines to releasing enzymes, absorbing nutrients, even plays a role in our immune system.
Like a mini brain just dedicated to keeping our digestive system happy.
Exactly. And what's even cooler is it's in constant communication with our actual brain. It influences our mood, our appetite, our overall sense of well-being.
Wow, so there's more to gut feelings than we might think. It seems like this enteric nervous system is way more important than we realized.
Absolutely. It's a hot area of research right now, uncovering all these connections between our gut and brain.
It just shows how interconnected everything is, even within the realm of neuroscience. There's always more to discover. It really makes you think, this whole other nervous system in our gut affecting our mood, everything. Crazy how connected our bodies are.
It's true. It's like we're with these amazing ecosystems, all these parts working together in ways we barely understand. And speaking of understanding, this chapter goes beyond just anatomy. It also talks about how scientists actually study the brain, the history of neuroscience, you could say.
Right, we touched on some of the techniques earlier, but I'd love to hear more about how brain research has evolved over time. It must have been quite a journey, from observing those early brain injuries to these high-tech imaging tools we have now.
Oh, it definitely has. Full of twists and turns. Like we said, those early pioneers were like detectives, studying the effects of injuries, trying to piece together what different brain areas actually did.
Trying to understand a machine by seeing what happens when it breaks down.
Exactly. And those early studies were essential. They laid the foundation. But then came the development of tools like EEG.
EEG, that was a big one, right? Being able to actually measure the brain's electrical activity.
Huge. Like finally being able to listen to the brain's electrical symphony helped us understand sleep, diagnose seizures, all sorts of things. But it wasn't very precise in terms of where the activity was happening.
Right, more of a general overview.
Yep, but then came ERPs, evoked response potentials, averaging brain responses to repeated stimuli.
Filtering out the noise, basically.
Exactly. Gives you a clearer signal, lets you study how the brain processes specific events, recognizing a face, hearing a sound.
Much more targeted. Okay, but then came the real game changer, brain imaging.
Oh, yes. PET, SPECT, fMRI, MEG, those are the ones everyone pictures when they think of brain scans.
The colorful images, different areas lighting up. So cool. How do they actually work?
Well, fMRI, for example, stands for Functional Magnetic Resonance Imaging. It measures changes in blood flow in the brain, the idea being more active areas need more blood.
So those images are like maps of brain activity, showing what parts of the brain are working hard during certain tasks.
Precisely. And as technology gets better, these imaging techniques are becoming even more sophisticated.
It's amazing to think we can see the brain in action like that. And then there's optogenetics, where you're actually controlling neurons with light.
It's pretty incredible, right? Allows for such precise manipulation, opening up whole new avenues of research. Who knows, maybe even therapeutic applications someday.
The possibilities are mind-boggling. It truly feels like a golden age of brain research. Every new discovery pushes the boundaries further.
It really does. The brain is the ultimate frontier. And what's fascinating is, despite all we've learned, there's still so much we don't know.
That's what makes it so exciting. Always more to explore, always another layer to uncover.
Exactly. So we've covered a lot in this deep dive, from the basic anatomy to the cutting-edge research. It's been quite a journey.
It really has. And I have to say, I'm walking away with a newfound appreciation for this amazing organ that makes us who we are.
Me too. It's truly remarkable. So to everyone listening, keep exploring, stay curious about your brain. It's an incredible gift.
Keep those brains buzzing. And if anything we've talked about today sparked your interest, let us know. What stood out? What questions do you have? We're always happy to hear from you.
After all, this is your deep dive, and we're just here to guide you.
And remember, your brain is constantly changing, adapting, being shaped by your experiences. Every thought, every feeling, every action is orchestrated by this amazing organ. So the more we understand it, the more we can appreciate the incredible gift of human consciousness.
Well said. Until next time, keep learning, keep those brains engaged.
And we'll catch you on our next deep dive.